And you feel no remorse for that?
I would kill him again.
Now I know what you're thinking. Who could have wronged this woman to the point where she's ready to kill whoever it is all over again? With such conviction, without a doubt, without a hesitation, she answered that question, that she would kill them again. Well, this is Mitchelle Blair, and she's talking about her children. Welcome to the Scare Post. Today we're going to be tackling the most bizarre, saddening case that I've probably ever come across. This is Mitchelle Blair, and she's killed not one but two of her children. And we're going to get into that right now. It's Detroit, 2015. It was supposed to be a simple eviction. See, but once the authorities showed up at Mitchelle Blair's house and started rummaging through everything, trying to get her out and off the property, they ended up finding nobody was prepared for it. It basically sent shockwaves all through Detroit. It was everywhere. The then 35-year-old Mitchelle Blair, she was living on the east side of Detroit with her 4 kids when she was evicted for not paying her rent. It's been said that from relatives that she's unable to, hold down a job, and she'd always call them for money or, ask for some sort of help. But those calls had stopped, and, they weren't going to help her anymore. They refused. They told her, just get a job or go back to school, figure it out yourself. You have kids. She, she didn't want to hear what they had to say. She just disregarded everything they said. But on the morning of March 24th, back in 2015, she was served an eviction, and, she had to vacate. But she wasn't even home. So they had sent a crew from the 36th court, the district court. They went inside and they started, taking her shit out the house. So they're, going through all of her things, and one of the things that they come across next, it wasn't even furniture. What they found was a deep freezer. A white deep freezer sitting in the middle of the living room. Inside, though, is what the disturbing part was, if you haven't already guessed. So what they find was the body of a teenage girl wrapped in a large plastic bag. So they stopped and they got a hold of the police. They called the police in. And when the police got there, the police removed the body and they made another discovery. Underneath the girl was another person. It was a boy right underneath her inside the freezer. So after finding out what was going on, one of the neighbors, they didn't waste any time telling the police exactly where she was. So the neighbors telling them where Mitchelle Blair actually is. So the police found her at another neighbor's house with her other 2 kids, because she had 4 kids, which, as you know, 2 are already found now in the freezer. So the other 2 are 8 and 17. But the other 2 kids, which are named Stephen Berry, who's 9 years old, and Stoney Blair, who's 13, they're not there. They're not with her. So the police now want to know exactly, where are your kids? Where's your other 2 kids? So the police are questioning her, and they pretty much have to arrest her for murder. So the police take her away, and, the only thing she says was, "I'm sorry." No explanation, just, "I'm sorry." So authorities took the bodies to a morgue so they can thaw them out for a couple of days, and it was like 3 or 4 days. And they began performing an autopsy on the children. The children were actually identified as Blair's 2 other children, Stephen and Stoney. The medical examiner ruled their deaths both homicides and had determined that they had been in that freezer for at least a couple of years. Mitchelle Blair then confesses to the murders at the Wayne County Circuit Court. She tells Judge Dana Hathaway that she killed her demons. She's referring to her children as demons after finding out that they were raping the youngest boy. A claim that no one even knows if it was true. It's just something she said, and it's the reason she gave why she killed the other 2 children.
Now, the information I have before me is that
You want to plead guilty to count 2, the premeditated murder of Stony Blair,
Yes.
and count 3, the felony murder of Stephen Barry.
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct that you want to plead guilty to those counts?
Yes.
Okay. You understand that if I accept a guilty plea, you'll be subject to a mandatory sentence of life in the Michigan Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole for both cases.
I understand.
Okay. You understand Michigan does not have the death penalty?
I do now.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure that you understand this isn't a sentence agreement between you and the people. You're voluntarily admitting to these 2 counts and subjecting yourself to those sentences.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Blair. I'm going to go over each of the rights. I see that you've signed the settlement offer notice of acceptance. So just bear with me. I'm going to read all of these and then ask you if you read them, understand them, and if you have any questions about them, okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Do you understand that if your plea is accepted, you will not have a trial of any kind, and that you're giving up the rights that you would have at a trial, including the right to be tried by a jury, to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, to have the prosecutor prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty, to have the witnesses against you appear at the trial, to question those witnesses, to have the court order any witnesses that you may have for your defense to appear at the trial. You also have the right to remain silent during the trial. You have the right to not have that silence used against you, and you have the right to testify at the trial if you want to testify. Do you understand those rights?
I do.
You understand by entering a guilty plea, you're waiving those rights?
I do.
Do you have any questions about those rights?
No.
Okay. Do you also understand that if your plea is accepted, you will be giving up any claim that the plea was the result of promises or threats that aren't disclosed to me at this proceeding, and that it was not your own choice to enter the plea? Do you understand that?
I do.
Okay. Am I right in understanding that this is your choice to enter this
Yes.
plea? Okay. And do you also understand that if your plea is accepted, any appeal from your conviction and sentence pursuant to this plea will be by application for leave to appeal and not by right? Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, so if you were convicted by a jury, you would have an automatic right to appeal, but if you enter a plea, you have to convince the Court of Appeals that they have to hear your case. Do you understand that?
I do.
Okay, fair enough. Now, Ms. Blair, I want to be absolutely clear. Has anyone forced you or threatened you to get you to enter a guilty plea today?
No.
This is your own choice.
Yes.
And you've made this after discussions with your attorney, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Harris, so the record's clear. Do you have any sort of record of how many times you've discussed entering this plea with your client?
At least 3 times, yeah.
All right, has Mr. Harris discussed with you that you will need to establish what's known as a factual basis?
Yes.
Okay. Has anyone made any promises to you in order to get you to enter this plea?
No.
Okay. Again, this is your voluntary choice to enter this plea.
It is.
Okay. And subject yourself to a mandatory life sentence.
Yes.
Okay.
How does something like this happen? Blair said she returned home one day in August of 2012 to find her son simulating sexual activity using, his action figures. It was then Blair decided to ask him, "Why are you doing that? Did you ever see anybody do this? Did anybody do this to you?" Well, he told her his brother Stephen had done this. She went upstairs to confront him regarding the situation. Blair said he confessed. He told her everything. And that's when she began punching and kicking her son. She then placed a garbage bag over his head and held it there until he lost consciousness. Blair stated that she's even repeatedly poured scalding hot water on his genitals, causing his skin to slough off. She's even made him drink Windex and admitted to choking him with a belt and lifting him off his feet with the belt around his neck, asking him if he likes how this feels, being choked with that belt. She states that he lost consciousness again. And after about 2 weeks of this torture, Stephen finally dies. On August 30th of 2012, Blair put his body in a deep freezer, and that's where he stayed until they found him. About 9 months after she murdered her son, Blair states that she found out that Stoney his sister, was also raping the youngest son. Well, that's when she began to starve Stoney and beat her as well, up until May 2013 when she died. She planned on turning herself in, but she stated that when her youngest son told her that he didn't want her to go, he didn't want her to leave him, she had decided to make other arrangements. Blair putting Stoney's body in the bag and stuffing her in the freezer on top of her brother. And she just continued life as normal, like nothing ever happened. I couldn't tell you how, but that's exactly what she continued to do. These kids were in that freezer for almost 3 years, and not one person batted an eyelash or even bothered to look for them. It's like nothing had ever happened. These kids had just disappeared. Their fathers weren't really present in their lives, and Blair had taken them out of school anyway. She told the school officials that she was just going to homeschool them, and that was that. Neighbors have gone on record asking about the children as well, and it seems that Mitchelle always had an excuse as to where the children were, or why people haven't seen them, or why she can't present them at this given moment. But Child Protective Services, once in September of the year 2002, and then again in February of 2005, a few years later, had substantiated claims of child neglect and or abuse committed by Blair. But she still held on to custody of her children, which was not the smartest. The 17-year-old daughter in an interview had once even corroborated that Blair did take the children out of school. She claims it was about 2 years prior to all of this happening. The petition states that the teen had last attended a Detroit public school when she was in 8th grade. But unfortunately, the Detroit public school spokeswoman, Mitchelle A. Zedrowski, stating, privacy rights, etc., wouldn't confirm if the children had ever attended Detroit public schools, which is very convenient for her. The state website says that parents in Michigan have no obligation to notify their school district or the State Department of Education if they plan to homeschool, although it is best recommended to avoid suspicion of truancy, if that helps at all. Now, there's really no mechanism or anything that alerts administrators or childcare professionals to check on students who have been removed from a school system. Blair never submitted any optional documentation to notify the State Department of Education she was even going to homeschool the children. A neighbor has gone on record named Jessica Porter. She knows the two surviving children, but had only even met Stoney through a window and never, ever seen the youngest at all. She stated that Blair, she loved those kids. She homeschooled them and superglued their assignments to the walls in their living room. The day that they had found the bodies, they examined the surviving children, and the children had disclosed they had been abused by their mother throughout their entire childhood. Medical professionals had identified over 20 scars and injuries, both old and new, on the 8-year-old's back, as well as some sort of loop-shaped scar and injuries on the back and buttocks that are consistent with being whipped with an extension cord, according to the custody petition. When they questioned the 17-year-old about a cut above her left eye, she had disclosed that she had been hit in the head with a 2x4. She had a broken front tooth from the time her mother hit her with a curling iron. She had also suffered scars from being burned with irons and whipped with cords as well. Mitchelle Blair had refused her children medical attention as well. Now, I only mention all of this because while this is all going on and she's in trial for the murder of the two children in the freezer, she's actively fighting for custody of the two children that are still alive. I cannot make this up.
I'm gonna need you to keep it quiet, or I'm gonna clear the courtroom. Just keep it quiet.
Never, never. You understand what I'm saying? I don't understand there's the whole crew here now, but y'all was never there for them. How many birthdays did you miss? Mikey, his ex-girlfriend, did more for them than any of y'all.
Mom, you have to stop. This is a hearing. Your attorney
Y'all
will
was
get a
never there
chance
for
to
them.
speak.
You want to put on a show for the news, though?
Mr. Devil.
Your Honor, he had no knowledge of any of the
And then the door shit, you gonna get on the news and say what's
Okay,
absurd?
Mom, you're
They
not
were
going to be able to
raping my
stay in the
kids.
hearing.
Period.
You can't be quiet until it's your turn.
You like a damn fool y'all putting on that
Step out
show.
here. Step out here for me.
You got to step
Raping my kids. You pathetic ass bitch, and he's a drunk. Now tell the truth on that.
South admittedly doesn't say that either father physically abused or tortured the children. This is a petition where the allegations are failure to protect. I don't want to argue the allegations at this point, but both fathers failed to support, care for their children for 2 years, at least 2 years. And for them to now come before this court and say we should be entitled to unsupervised visits is alarming. And
Are you able to say why you were late to the hearing?
Mr. Barry, can you just talk to us how you feel? Mr. Barry, we haven't had a chance to talk to you yet. What can you tell us about this?
So, Mitchelle Blair clearly loses custody of the remaining 2 children. The fathers do not retain custody or any visitation from what I have gathered, and the children end up in foster homes. And from what I've seen, they're doing quite well and they're in happy homes from what I've read. As part of their relocation regarding their adoption, they had to go through counseling, clearly, because this is a very traumatizing situation. The youngest child, who Mitchelle states was sexually abused, has said himself that none of those things occurred. Now, I don't know if he's saying that now in recanting, or maybe he told his mother those things out of fear. She seemed like a pretty, intense woman. She could have possibly been making this whole thing up. I really can't say, but I have seen in past interviews that she's very passionate about the topic of sexual assault. She has stated that when she was younger, she had told her mother that she herself was sexually assaulted, and she said that her mother really didn't do anything about it. She failed her. So I guess, maybe she jumped to conclusions. There's clearly some PTSD going on with the entire situation involving sexual abuse. It's very sad that this happened, and even if what she states did occur between her children, it was her job to not only protect the one child, but to redirect the others and possibly get them the treatment or help that they needed. But this was definitely, at the end of the day, not the answer by any means necessary. It's actually beyond me that they let this woman even stand trial as mentally competent.
I would kill him again.
They let this woman stand trial.
I would kill him again.
Mentally fit. Mentally competent. There's so many failures all the way around with this entire case, but please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I appreciate you taking out the time to watch this video and spend some time over here at the Scare Post. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see the next one. Take care of yourselves out there. It's a scary world.